In the last decade, the police body camera has changed everything. It has become an impartial, unflinching eye, documenting the harsh realities of law enforcement from a raw, first-person perspective. Millions of us watch this footage online, witnessing traffic stops, arrests, and intense confrontations. We watch it to understand, to judge, to be informed. We've become accustomed to the shaky camera work, the muffled audio, and the sudden bursts of adrenaline. But what happens when this tool of objective reality captures something that is not real, or something that is too real? What happens when a routine call, a simple wellness check, or a home security alarm leads an officer into a situation that defies all logic and explanation? The camera keeps recording, its cold digital eye capturing moments of pure, undiluted horror that are never shown on the evening news. These are 4 allegedly true stories, told from the perspective of law enforcement officers, about the terrifying, unexplainable, and deeply unnerving things their body cams captured in the dead of night.
Our first story tonight comes from a former patrol officer named Ben, who responded to a seemingly routine home invasion call. He learned that sometimes the most terrifying threats are not the ones you confront, but the ones you miss entirely, the ones that are only revealed later by the cold, impartial eye of the camera. What his body cam captured that night was a fleeting, impossible image that called into question not only the safety of the homeowners, but his own perception of reality. It was a single, chilling frame of video that turned a standard police report into a piece of evidence from a nightmare, a silent testament to the horrors that can hide in plain sight. I was a cop for about 6 years, and in that time you see a lot of strange things, but nothing ever came close to the call we got on a rainy Tuesday night in October. The dispatch came in around 2 a.m. A silent alarm triggered at a large 2-story house in a wealthy, secluded neighborhood. The homeowners were an elderly couple who were away on vacation in Europe. A neighbor had reported seeing flashlight beams moving around inside the house an hour earlier, but had been too scared to call until the alarm company finally notified them. It was a classic burglary in progress scenario, the kind of call that puts you on high alert immediately. We approached the scene with caution. My partner, a senior officer named Wallace, took the lead. We parked our patrol car a block away and approached the house on foot, our mag lights cutting through the thick, drizzling rain. The house was a huge, dark monolith, set far back from the road and surrounded by a dense, manicured garden. Every single light was off, which was the first red flag. Burglars usually use at least one light to see what they're doing. This felt different. It felt quiet, too quiet. There were no broken windows, no pried open doors. The house was sealed tight, a perfect picture of suburban peace, except for the faint, intermittent beep of the internal alarm system that we could just barely hear. Wallace and I did a full perimeter check, our boots squelching in the wet grass. He took the back of the house and I took the front and sides. My body cam was on, its small, blinking red light a tiny beacon in the oppressive darkness. I swept my flashlight across the ground floor windows, peering inside at the dark, silent rooms. They were filled with the ghostly shapes of furniture covered in white sheets, just as the homeowner's son had told dispatch. Everything appeared to be undisturbed. I made my way around the side of the house, my light beam dancing across the wet siding, checking every possible point of entry. It was all clear, all secure. I met Wallace at the back of the house. He had found the point of entry. A small second-story bathroom window had been expertly removed from its frame, the glass pane leaning carefully against the wall below. It was a professional job, clean and quiet. This wasn't a smash and grab. This was someone who knew what they were doing. We called for backup and established a perimeter. Once the other units arrived, we made our entry through the front door, which the homeowner's son had given us the code for. We moved in formation, clearing the house room by room, our weapons drawn, the only sounds being our own quiet commands and the creak of the old floorboards. The house was cold and still. We swept through the entire ground floor, the living room, the dining room, the kitchen, the study. Everything was immaculate, untouched. The sheets on the furniture were undisturbed. Nothing was out of place. Nothing was missing. It was bizarre. Why would a professional burglar break into a house and then not take anything? We moved upstairs, clearing the bedrooms one by one. They were just as pristine, just as silent. We finally reached the bathroom where the window had been removed. The window pane was gone, but there were no footprints, no signs of disturbance inside. The intruder had seemingly vanished into thin air. After a final, thorough sweep, we declared the house clear. It was one of the strangest calls I had ever been on. We concluded that the intruder must have been scared off by our arrival, climbing back out the window and escaping before we had fully surrounded the house. We secured the window, filed our report, and left the keys with the concerned neighbor. On the drive back to the station, Wallace and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong with the whole situation. It felt like we had walked into a play after all the actors had already left the stage, leaving only an unsettling silence behind them. Back at the station, I had to log my body cam footage as evidence, a standard procedure for any home invasion call. I sat down at my desk, the glow of the monitor pushing back the early morning darkness. I started scrubbing through the video file of my perimeter check. It was mostly boring footage, a shaky view of wet grass, siding, and dark windows. I was about to sign off on it when I decided to do one last slow-motion review of the footage from the side of the house, just to be thorough. I played it back at 1/4 speed, watching my flashlight beam crawl across the dark, empty windows. And then I saw it. For a single, solitary frame, less than a 30th of a second, as my flashlight beam passed over a dark, second-story bedroom window, something was there. My blood ran cold. I paused the video and zoomed in, my heart pounding in my chest. Staring back at me from the darkness of that upstairs room was a face. It was pale, almost luminous, with wide, dark, and completely featureless eyes. And it was smiling. A wide, thin, and impossibly long smile that stretched from ear to ear. It was the stuff of pure, undiluted nightmares. I wasn't just looking at an empty window in the recording. I was looking at a person, or something that looked like a person, who had been standing there in the pitch-black room, watching me as I walked below. The entity had been perfectly still, and so pale that it was only visible in the split second that my flashlight beam passed directly over it. It had made no sound. It had set off no alarms. It had just been watching me, knowing that I was there and knowing that I couldn't see it, enjoying the secret of its silent, hidden vigil from the darkness above. I immediately called Wallace over to my desk, my voice trembling. I showed him the still frame. He went completely pale, the color draining from his face. We had cleared that exact room. We had stood in that very spot, weapons drawn, and we had seen nothing. The room had been empty, but the camera, the cold, impartial, digital eye, did not lie. It had captured something that our own eyes had completely missed, a silent observer hiding in the shadows of the supposedly empty house. It had been there, with us, the whole time. A silent, smiling ghost in the machine. The implications were horrifying. This was not a burglar. This was something else entirely. Had it still been in the house when we were clearing it? Was it hiding in a way we couldn't comprehend? In a closet? Under a bed? Or perhaps in the very shadows themselves? Or had it simply vanished as quietly and as inexplicably as it had appeared? We never found an answer. The homeowners returned from their trip and reported that nothing was missing, but they said the house felt different, colder. They sold it a few months later, complaining of a constant feeling of being watched. I left the force about a year after that incident. I couldn't shake the image of that face in the window. It haunts my dreams. It changed the way I see the world. It taught me that the most terrifying things are not the dangers you can see and confront, but the ones that exist just on the edge of your perception, watching you from a darkness you are not even aware of. The body camera is supposed to be a tool for capturing the truth, for providing an objective record of events. But what do you do when the truth it captures is something that is not supposed to exist? I still have a copy of that still frame, saved on a secure drive. Sometimes, when I'm feeling brave, I look at it, The face is always there, always smiling, that same wide, impossible smile. It feels like it's looking right at me, through the screen, through the years. It's a permanent reminder of that rainy night, a reminder that we are not alone in the big dark. It's a reminder that sometimes, when you are staring into an empty, dark window, there is something on the other side, staring right back at you, waiting patiently for you to move on. The official report for that night lists the incident as a burglary unfounded. It states that the house was checked and found to be empty. But I know the truth. The house was not empty that night. The camera saw what we could not. It saw the real intruder, the one that didn't come to steal material, possessions. It came to steal something far more valuable: our sense of safety, our belief in a rational world, and our ability to ever feel truly alone in a dark and silent room. And in my case, I can tell you with certainty, it was completely and utterly successful.
Our second story comes from a veteran officer named Miles, who was part of a two-man unit responding to a late-night security call. The incident took place in a location that is already unnerving after hours, a large, multi-story department store. What he and his partner encountered that night was not a common burglar, but something that blurred the line between the mundane and the deeply, terrifyingly unnatural. His body camera captured a sequence of events so bizarre and chilling that it was officially buried in a redacted report, a silent testament to the fact that some things, once seen, can never be properly explained away, only hidden from view. It was a Saturday night, deep in the middle of a sweltering summer, and the city was quiet. My partner Chris and I were working the graveyard shift, which mostly consisted of dealing with minor disturbances and noise complaints. Around 3:30 a.m., we got a call that was a little out of the ordinary. It was a silent alarm from the old downtown department store, a massive 5-story building that had been a city landmark for a century. The alarm was triggered by a motion sensor in the menswear department on the 3rd floor. The store's private security had already done an external check and found all the doors and windows secure, so they called us in to do the interior sweep. We met the store's night watchman, a nervous elderly man named Walter, at the main employee entrance. He unlocked the heavy steel doors, his hands, trembling slightly. "I've been hearing things all night," he whispered, his voice shaky. "Scraping sounds from the upper floors. I thought it was just the building settling." He let us in and stayed by the door, refusing to go any further. The inside of the department store was like a tomb. The power was on, but only the dim security lights were active, casting long, distorted shadows that made the familiar shapes of clothing racks and displays look like monstrous, alien creatures. The silence was absolute, a heavy, oppressive blanket. Chris and I began our sweep, starting on the ground floor. Our body cameras were rolling, their red lights the only warm color in the cold, sterile environment. We moved methodically, our flashlights cutting through the gloom, checking behind counters and in changing rooms. Everything was still, untouched. It felt more like a museum than a retail store. After clearing the first 2 floors, we made our way up the silent, unmoving escalator to the 3rd floor, where the alarm had been triggered. The menswear department was a maze of suits, shirts, and, of course, dozens of eerily lifelike mannequins, all frozen in casual, nonchalant poses, their blank plastic faces staring out into the darkness. We split up to cover the area faster, our voices echoing in the vast open space as we called out our positions. "Clear by the sportswear! Clear by the formal wear!" I was making my way down a long central aisle when I saw it. About 50 feet ahead of me, standing directly in the middle of the main walkway, was a single mannequin. It was a male mannequin, dressed in a sharp, dark suit, but it was positioned wrong. Unlike the others, which were on raised platforms, this one was standing right on the floor, and it wasn't in a pose. It was just standing there, perfectly straight, its arms at its sides, facing directly away from me. I called out to Chris over the radio, "Hey, I've got something weird over here, in the main aisle. Looks like..." One of the mannequins fell off its platform. I started walking towards it, my flashlight beam centered on its back. It was strange. There were no empty platforms nearby. Where had it come from? I was about 20 feet away when Chris's voice crackled back in my ear. "Just leave it, Miles. We'll let the day staff deal with it. Let's just finish the sweep." His voice sounded strained, a little on edge. I agreed, and I turned my back on the mannequin to check the adjacent section of designer. Suits. The sweep of the suit section took me maybe 30 seconds. I turned back around to head towards the shoe department, shining my light back down the main aisle where the strange mannequin had been. My heart stopped. It was gone. The aisle was completely empty. "Chris," I said into my radio, my voice tight. "The mannequin. It's gone." There was a long pause before he responded, and his voice was now a tense whisper. "Miles, get out of there. Get out of there now. I'm heading your way." I didn't understand his panic, but the authority in his voice was absolute. I started quickly walking back the way I came, my head on a swivel, my light cutting frantically through the darkness. And then I saw it again. To my left, at the end of a short aisle between racks of shirts, it was there. The same mannequin in the same dark suit. But this time, it was facing me, and it was closer, maybe 30 feet away. It was standing in the exact same pose, perfectly straight, arms at its sides. But its blank, featureless face was now pointed directly at me. I froze, a cold, primal fear washing over me. It was impossible. I hadn't heard a sound. There was no way anyone could have moved that heavy, awkward thing so quickly and so silently. It wasn't just a misplaced mannequin anymore. It felt like I was being hunted. Just then, Chris came running around the corner, his own light beam bouncing erratically. He grabbed my arm. "We need to go," he hissed, his eyes wide with a terror that mirrored my own. We started moving quickly towards the escalator, our backs to the mannequin. We had taken maybe 10 steps when we heard it, a soft scraping sound from behind us, a sound like hard plastic being dragged slowly across the polished floor. We both spun around at the same time, our flashlights finding the mannequin instantly. It was now in the middle of the main aisle again, 10 feet closer than it had been just a second ago. We didn't wait to see what would happen next. We ran. We scrambled down the escalator, our feet pounding on the metal steps, and didn't stop until we were back on the ground floor. We burst out of the employee entrance, gasping for air, into the warm, humid night. Walter, the night watchman, just looked at us with his sad, knowing eyes. "You saw him, didn't you?" he whispered. "The tall man. He walks the floors some nights. He doesn't like visitors. He told us it had been happening for years, ever since a distraught customer had taken his own life in one of the changing rooms on the 3rd floor. We drove back to the station in a stunned silence. The official report we filed was vague, citing a possible faulty motion sensor and an unsecured mannequin as the cause of the alarm. We made no mention of what we had actually seen. Who would believe us? The next day, out of a morbid curiosity, I pulled up my Bodycam footage. The video was clear. It showed me turning my back on the mannequin. It showed me turning back around to an empty aisle. It showed the mannequin reappear, closer, facing me. But the footage captured something that I had missed in my panic. As I zoomed in on the mannequin's blank plastic face in that final terrifying moment before we ran, I saw something that wasn't there before. The camera's high-definition sensor had picked up a detail my own eyes had failed to see in the dim light. On its smooth, featureless cheek, there was a single, tiny, glistening track. It was the unmistakable trail of a single, fresh tear, as if the plastic man in the dark suit was weeping silently in the darkness of the empty store. The image was so sad and so deeply, profoundly disturbing, it has been burned into my memory forever. I requested a transfer to a different precinct the following week. I couldn't shake the feeling that the department store was haunted not by a ghost, but by a profound and eternal sadness, an echo of a final, desperate moment that had somehow imprinted itself onto the store, giving a strange, sorrowful life to the lifeless things within its walls. The Bodycam footage was logged into evidence and then, I later learned, was permanently archived and sealed by the department, labeled as inconclusive. It was easier to bury the evidence than to confront a truth that had no place in a police report. I still think about that night. I think about the silence, the shadows, and the feeling of being watched by those empty plastic eyes. I think about the soft, scraping sound of its slow, deliberate approach. Most of all, I think about that single, impossible tear. Was it a trick of the light, a reflection, or was it a genuine sign of a trapped, sorrowful consciousness? I will never know the answer. All I know is that I will never walk through a department store after closing time ever again. Some places, I've learned, are best left to the things that inhabit their silence. I left that precinct, but the footage is still there, locked away in a digital vault, a silent, objective recording of an event that defies all objective reality. It is a permanent record of the night two police officers were confronted by a weeping mannequin in a dark, empty store. It is a story that can never be officially told, a piece of evidence that proves nothing and everything at the same time. It is a chilling reminder that even a camera, a tool of pure logic and data, can sometimes capture the impossible, the sorrowful, and the truly, deeply unnerving. Our third story is a deeply unsettling account from a veteran 911 dispatcher named Sarah. While police officers confront the physical horrors of the world, dispatchers are the silent witnesses, the first point of contact with chaos and despair. They are trained to handle the worst of humanity. But this call was different. It wasn't loud, it wasn't violent, but it contained a quiet, procedural horror that slowly dismantled her sense of reality. Her audio recording of the call became a legendary piece of evidence within her department, a ghost in the system that no one could explain, a terrifying reminder that some emergencies are not of this world. I worked as a 911 dispatcher for 15 years. In that time, I heard it all. I talked people through their worst moments. I listened to their last breaths. I was trained to be a calm, reassuring voice in the storm, a human anchor in a sea of panic. My job was to filter chaos into actionable information, to be the unshakable first line of defense. I thought I had become immune to fear, that I had heard every possible horror the human experience could offer. Then, on a quiet Wednesday night, I received a call that proved me wrong, a call that broke through all my training and all my composure, and left a permanent scar on my psyche. The call came in at 1:17 a.m. There was no screaming, no panic, just the faint, almost inaudible sound of a child's whisper. "Hello?" the small voice said, so quiet I had to crank the volume on my headset all the way up. "Is someone there?" I immediately went into my trained protocol for a child caller. 911, what's your emergency?" I said, my voice calm and gentle. "My name is Sarah. I'm here to help you. Can you tell me your name?" The child, a little boy who sounded no older than 7 or 8, whispered back, "My name is Toby. There's a man in my house. He's the wrong man." A chill went down my spine. "The wrong man?" I asked, keeping my voice level. "Toby, can you tell me what you mean by that? Is it someone you don't know?" There was a long pause, filled with the faint sound of his shallow, frightened breaths. "No," he finally whispered. "He looks like my daddy. He sounds like my daddy. But he's not my daddy. His eyes are wrong. They're too smiley." The phrase, "too smiley," was so childish and yet so deeply, profoundly creepy, it made the hair on my arms stand up. The boy was not describing a stranger. He was describing something pretending to be his father. I tried to keep him on the line, my fingers flying across the keyboard as I tried to get a location trace on the call. The system, however, was struggling. The signal was weak, bouncing between multiple towers, a common issue with cell calls from rural areas. "Toby, where's the wrong man right now?" I asked. "He's downstairs," the boy whispered. "He's making dinner for my mommy. She doesn't know he's wrong. She's laughing. But our dog, Buddy, he knows. Buddy won't stop growling at him from under the table." The detail about the dog, the animal instinct, made the story feel terrifyingly real. The boy was not imagining this. He was witnessing a performance. "Toby, where are you right now?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper itself. "I'm in my closet," he replied. "I'm hiding. I think he knows I know." Suddenly, I heard a new sound on the line. It was the sound of a man's voice, muffled, from a distance. It was a cheerful, fatherly voice. "Toby, where are you, slugger? Dinner's ready." The voice sounded perfectly normal, exactly like a father calling his son. But Toby's next whisper drained all the blood from my face. "That's him," he breathed. "He's coming upstairs. He's calling me slugger. My real daddy never calls me that." I heard the sound of slow, heavy footsteps creaking on what sounded like wooden stairs, getting closer and closer. "Toby, stay quiet," I urged, my own heart pounding in my ears. "Don't make a sound." The footsteps stopped, right outside what I assumed was the boy's bedroom door. The cheerful voice called out again, right on the other side of the door. "Toby, are you in there, pal? No more games now. Come on out. The boy let out a tiny, terrified whimper, a sound he couldn't hold back. On the other end of the line, I heard the man's cheerful voice stop. It was replaced by a low, guttural chuckle that was not human. There you are, the voice said, no longer cheerful but low and menacing. Then I heard the sound of the closet door being slowly, deliberately ripped from its hinges, a sound of splintering wood. Toby let out a single, piercing scream, a sound of pure, unadulterated terror. The scream was abruptly cut off. It was replaced by the sound of wet, tearing static, and then the line went dead. I sat there frozen, the dial tone buzzing in my headset like an angry insect. The entire call had lasted less than 3 minutes, but it had felt like an eternity. I immediately dispatched every available unit to the GPS. Coordinates the system had finally managed to lock onto just before the call dropped. The address was a remote farmhouse on the far outskirts of the county, a place known as the old Miller property. The first patrol car arrived on the scene less than 10 minutes later. The officer's voice came over the radio, filled with a deep confusion. "Dispatch, I'm at the Miller property," he said. "Are you sure about this address? There's nothing here. The house was torn down years ago. It's just an empty field and a collapsed foundation." My blood ran cold. I stared at the address on my screen. It was correct. The GPS lock was accurate. But the house the boy had called from, the house with the closet and the wooden stairs, did not exist. It had been demolished 5 years prior after a fire. It was an impossible, terrifying contradiction. The call had been real. The boy's fear had been real. The scream had been real. But the location, the physical space where it all happened, was nothing but a ghost, a memory on a patch of empty land. The terror of that call was not just what happened, but where it happened from. The official report logged the incident as a prank call from an untraceable number, a convenient and simple explanation for something that was anything but. But everyone in the dispatch center that night had listened to the recording. We all heard Toby's fear. We all heard the man with the 2 smiley eyes. And we all heard that final terrible scream. The call became a legend in our department, a ghost story we would tell to the rookies. We called it the silence call, a call that came from nowhere and ended in an impossible, terrifying silence. I tried to forget about it, but the memory of Toby's voice was burned into my mind. A few years later, I did some digging into the history of the old Miller property. I found an old, archived newspaper article from the 1950s. It told the story of the Miller family. The father, a man named Thomas Miller, had returned from the war a changed man, prone to fits of rage and strange, smiling moods. One night, he had murdered his wife and his 8-year-old son, a boy named Toby. The boy's body had been found hidden inside a closet in his bedroom. The article had a picture of Thomas Miller. It was a grainy black and white photo, but his eyes were clear. They were wide, dark, and they were fixed in a bizarre, cheerful, and deeply unsettling smile. I realized then that my call had not been a prank. It was something far stranger. It was an echo, a psychic imprint of a horrific event, replaying itself over and over again through the years. A ghost made not of spirit, but of pure, traumatic memory. A story trapped in the very fabric of the land itself. A story that just wanted someone to finally hear it. I quit my job as a dispatcher a few months after that discovery. I could no longer be the person who listened to the darkness on the other end of the line. I couldn't shake the feeling that the lines between the past and the present, the real and the imagined, were far thinner than we think. I learned that some emergencies are not about stopping what is happening, but about bearing witness to what has already happened, over and over again, and that some screams never truly fade away. They just wait for someone to pick up the phone and listen. The audio recording of that call is still filed away somewhere, deep in a digital archive, a piece of objective, electronic data that documents an event that could not have possibly occurred. It is a permanent record of a little boy's last moments, a call for help that crossed the boundaries of time itself. It is a chilling reminder that not all monsters are made of flesh and blood. Some are made of memory, and they are just waiting on the other end of the line for you to answer their call and listen to their story.